start with a softball. Are you a Twitter person?
I'm a LinkedIn person.
You're a LinkedIn
I'm a Twitter
person.
lurker, but a LinkedIn OG.
Nice. And what is your LinkedIn bio?
Oh, it's one of those like super professional summaries. Yeah.
Yes.
As you do on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Okay, we are here at the Real World Asset Summit. Can you define for us what are real world assets?
I think that's a magic question that everyone's trying to figure out, but how to bring something that actually generates tangible cash flows and represent that and bring it somehow on chain is the goal.
And why do you think the on-chain component is important? Or do you?
I do think it is important. I think there's different ways. We've had securitization in the financial industry for quite some time to have fractional representation of things. But if we're talking about a way to transmit value peer-to-peer, I think it's important to have something that really feels organically, so you can have this, fulfill the promise of like the building blocks of money, right? That's what people talk about when they talk about blockchain. I think it's important to figure out, how does this all make sense so that we're actually finding something that is worth this complexity versus just building on hype.
Yeah. We've heard a lot about other people mention like speed, efficiency, removing middlemen. Does that land for you? I know you come from sort of straddle traditional finance, so maybe that's less.
I think if you think through, some of the use cases that are often discussed about something like getting a mortgage, which, many people have been through that process and, just all of the paperwork involved, you can see a reason why there's a better way to do things. I do think, however, there's a lot of infrastructure about the current ways of doing things. And the new technology is, something new to learn. So there is going to have to be, really this aha moment so that we can overcome what we already have built up, even if it's not what you would build de novo if you were starting today.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of promise in the technology and, folks are really trying to figure out how to build with this.
Can you name the single biggest hurdle in the way of RWA adoption?
Oh, there's several. I would say usability, right? I think for anyone who's been around the space, even if you're talking about old-fashioned crypto, there's an oxymoron, right? This idea of transacting on chain, custodying, it's definitely, you can learn it. I've learned it. You all have learned it. It's not insurmountable, but it is definitely a gap from how we interact with the internet today. So again, you might argue it's better, but you have to overcome where we are, now versus this, perhaps utopia of the future.
Yeah, I hear that.
Totally.
Okay, what's your hottest take on real world assets or tokenization?
Ooh, can I take a pass on that one?
Totally.
Okay, when I say regulation, word association game here.
Okay.
When I say regulation, you say
my life right now. It is, in all seriousness, I'm not a lawyer. I just spend a lot of time with them, and working at a trade association, regulation is something that you spend a lot of time. I'm used to people not caring.
Wow. So you're like, wow.
Yeah.
Changed.
But it's not necessarily a good thing that people care. I was actually kind of excited because the panel, it did empty out a little bit when the topic turned to regulation, which I actually think is a good sign because you want to focus on like what's actually being built. The regulation will come around it and the regulation needs to solve. There's a reason for regulation, but it certainly shouldn't be leading the conversation.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Just wrapping up here, what RWA are you most bullish on and why?
I think it's still the biggest use case has been stablecoins. And I think what people are trying to work on now that cash has value, like again, we've all grown up in an environment for the past, decade plus where you're used to cash not bringing anything.
Yeah.
And you kind of forget that now it does. And I think, it's going to be harder if the stablecoins that are out there now don't have a way of passing on that yield. But if they can solve past that, there's a lot of people trying to do interesting things with treasuries and money market funds. However, I think there's also just, really interesting use cases that can be solved in private credit. So I spend a lot of time in that world and, lending, and the whole idea is providing finance for small and medium enterprises to have capital. Banks have historically done this. In some recent crises, they've pulled back, so you've seen new sources of capital. And if you can actually figure out how to do that on chain in a way that these things can then be assembled and then be created into funds and then find investors, you'll really be solving a lot of problems. So I think that's going to be a really interesting use case if some of the early work can turn into some real adoption.
Nice.
Amazing.
Perfect.
Michelle, thank you so much.
Thank you.